What's up guys, it's your host Spartanic Arts DxD back with another high school DxD related video, and we're back with What If Issei Was Betrayed Part 7. Thank you so much for the support. We already hit 11,000 subscribers, on our way to 12k. It's absolutely insane. I really do appreciate it. I cannot thank you enough, but enough of my emotional talk. Let's go ahead and get right into Part 7. Chapter 19, The Aftermath. Deep in a forest stood a figure who himself was tired as fuck. The battle had worn him out that much as well. He quickly sat Issei down by a tree and sat down to take a breath. He truly hadn't expected that kid to do so much damage. "Damn kid, you sure are something, aren't you?" Great Red muttered. Suddenly, two lights appeared on both of Issei's hand. "The Apocalypse Dragon, what do you think of our hopes?" Bahamut said. Great Red snored at the Annihilation Dragon. He would ask for that after the battle, wouldn't he? He quickly thought. This kid's got some serious balls. I could feel the raw determination rolling off of him. The kid has the power to change the world forever. That is the truth, he said. Drake chuckled and made himself known. It's amazing that after all that happened to him, he's still able to go through every day like nothing happened, he added. Great Red then started to listen more intently as Bahamut spoke. That's thanks to all the people who embraced him as hyoudou and not a tool to be used. That's the one thing those devils failed to miss, he added. Suddenly, everyone was interrupted as hyoudou himself awoke, spitting blood up as he sat up. He was clearly in a serious condition. He couldn't see very well, and as everything was blurry and dizzy. As his vision cleared, the first thing that he saw was a smirking Great Red. Well, speak of the devil, he joked. As Issei finally got his bearings back, he looked around the area to see they were no longer in the underworld. He finally looked up to Great Red in disbelief. Great Red? He mumbled out. He could barely speak up as well. That was one hell of a battle, kid. You've proven your determination to me. You have your support in this war. You have my support in this war, Great Red said. Issei understood him fairly easily. He was still a little dizzy and out of place. How are you feeling? Dreg asked suddenly. Issei blinked and coughed up a bit more blood. Like my insides have been blended and boiled at temperatures hotter than lava, he managed out. That earned a chuckle from Great Red. That was the risk of the Annihilation Drive. It paid off, though, Bahamut said suddenly. Suddenly, Great Red put his hand on Issei's shoulder, and then he glowed a golden color. Issei looked at him in confusion as he explained. I should a bit of my energy to help speed along your healing. It's not much, but it will help you for now, he explained. Issei felt a little bit better, and was able to stand up and lean against the tree he was sitting by. So what's next? Drade said suddenly. Issei looked in the thought as everyone waited for his answer. It's time. We will begin the final preparations and strike afterwards. This has been coming for a while, and we need to do it as soon as we can. I have a perfect spot to go for, he said strongly. They all listened closely as he continued to explain. The dragon's territory in the underworld. Since the underworld will most likely be the battlefield for the most of it, we should use that as our base of operations now, he said. They were surprised quickly as they heard him. Great Red smirked at seeing the determination shining through Issei's eyes. The devils won't know what hit them. Then we should gather the rest of them and get it done as soon as we can, before the factions start to mobilize even more themselves, Drake added. Issei nodded and stood up straight. Well, let's go introduce them to our new teammate, he said with a grin. Great Red adopted the same grin. Try not to scare them into shitting their pants, Great Red, Bahamut added with a chuckle. Great Red laughed after hearing that. No promises, he said. Issei chuckled and put his hand on Great Red's shoulder, and they both entered a magic circle, vanishing from the forest soon after. They set off to prepare a group for the final push. Scene break, now we're going back to the underworld. Back in the underworld, shortly after Great Red left with Issei, stood all the devils who witnessed the battle. They were all shocked. They had no idea what to do. The area where the fight took place was nothing but a wasteland now, a testament to how much they were ants compared to Issei and his group. What do we do? Rias asked weakly. Silence was met after her question. No one would say any words. All we can do is move forwards and prepare for the worst. We need to be ready at a moment's notice. However, with their fight, Issei will mostly be out of commission for a week at least. That gives us a window, Serafal said aloud. Sir Zex nodded numbly. Before anyone else could speak up, it suddenly got darker, and they felt a presence of the power of God. They turned to see Orphis and Keokeo. What happened here? Anyone could feel the power unleashed, Keokeo asked while looking at the wasteland. Orphis was silent as she looked across the barren area. This power was God-class, maybe more. This is the signs of a gigantic battle between Great Red and him. I didn't think that boy would try to recruit that dragon, she said quickly. Everyone wondered what she meant by that. Orphis? What do you mean? Serafal asked. Orphis looked at Serafal for a moment before speaking up again. Great Red is called the Apocalypse Dragon for a reason. There are only 3 beings with that kind of power. Well, now there's 4. Issei hyoudou has just reached power higher than one can imagine, she started. Sir Zex was interested and spoke up. You said 3 beings. I'm assuming you and Great Red are 2 of them, and Issei is the new one. Who is the other? He asked. Orpheus looked at him for a moment. Triaxa 666, the apocalyptic beast. The very monster that the god of the Bible sealed away many eons ago, she said softly. They were shocked at hearing that. Keo smirked and spoke up. The beast is sealed away. No need to wet your pants. What Orpheus is saying is gather of every ounce of the power you have. You're going to be facing 2 beings on the Triaxis level. If you don't, you'll be cannon fodder, he said. Everyone was silent after hearing that. What was coming? They all thought quickly. Seraphol, you addressed the council. I'm going to go around and make sure our allies are ready. The war is finally nearing, Sir Zex suddenly said. Seraphol nodded and disappeared in her own magic circle. It was time. Sir Zex looked at his sister and her Purge. You be ready to face whatever Issei is going to throw at us. He won't hold back, so we can't either. He will most likely come for you with the intent to kill, he said seriously. They all gulped, then nodded hesitantly. The war was just on the horizon. Time was counting down quickly. Scene break. We're back with Issei and Great Red and the fucking squad. The 2 of them reappeared outside the mansion. Great Red looked up at the building and chuckled. So this is where you live, he joked. Issei just chuckled. Well, it's better than a rundown church. I think the others would prefer this better than where I lived before, he said. Great Red shook his eyes as Issei continued to chuckle. Word of advice. They won't take it well, Issei said suddenly. Great Red only laughed harder. It wasn't counting on it, though, he said quickly. Issei nodded. They trudged to the door to open up. That was when the bomb went off. The first person to see them was Kokaville, whose jaw dropped to the floor in an instant. Donosik was coming down the stairs when he saw them and nearly fell right on the ground. Issei? Kokaville asked in disbelief. Issei only nodded humbly. Kokaville looked at the newcomer and instantly his eyes were widened in fear. You're Great Red, right? He asked quickly. Issei chuckled as Great Red gave a toothy grin. Kokaville gulped and spoke up. Damn, that would be a fight I would like to see, he said. Issei shook his head. You might just see it soon enough. We're coming closer to it, Issei said suddenly. Kokaville's eyes widened. You mean it's starting soon? He asked. Issei nodded numbly. Before Kokaville or anyone could say anything, a screech was heard. Issei! It was Rainier and Colorwarner. Before Issei knew it, he was groaning in pain from being tackled by the 2 girls. How are you? Rainier asked worriedly. Issei only chuckled and sat up. I'm fine, just a little sore, he said. Suddenly a green light appeared. And it was with Drake who spoke up. A little sore. Ha! You're lucky if you don't have any serious internal damage, Drake snorted loudly. Rainier glared at him along with Colorwarner. Issei flinched behind the looks of the woman. What does he mean? Kuroka suddenly asked as she stepped in. Donosik watched silently as he held a laugh at Issei getting scorned by them. Just a battle that made the region they were fighting and buried of any life. Bahama added, amused. Great Red smirked and held back a chuckle at how the women, who were definitely smitten with Issei, were scorning for him fighting recklessly. That's that, Colorwarner stuttered while pointing up at a new face. That's when Colorwarner stuttered while pointing at the new face. Great Red only smirked and stepped up. Allow me to introduce myself. Great Red, the Apocalypse Dragon. He gave a toothy grin. Most of them gulped at the power he let out. Timat, who was sitting idly by the counter, decided to speak up. So what did your battle entail, Issei? She asked seriously. Issei rubbed the back of his head and sleepishly began to speak. It started out in the dimensional gap, which was shortly transferred to the underworld. After the devil showed up to see the commotion, my final stage in the evolution began and I went into full dragon form. Shortly after returning to my human form, but the battle then made its way to the final stages, and I have something risky to finish it in. The end, he explained. Reino narratorized at the end of the statement. What was risky, she asked. Issei gulped and stepped closer. The Juggernaut drive, more like Bahamut's drive. It turned me into a beast as Great Red couldn't handle the ferocity of it, Issei said. Great Red started to speak up. It's more like a monster. I wouldn't dare fight that thing again. I could tell you were in full control, he said suddenly. Issei shook his head and spoke up. Enough of that. Now it's time to address what will be happening soon, he said suddenly. Everyone listened intently as he began again. After I heal up, we are going to take the dragon's territory in the underworld. Since the war will most likely be fought mostly there, it will be a base of operations for us. The clock is ticking and we're going to move soon, he said loudly. Everyone's eyes widened. It was time. The dragon's territory, huh? A fitting place for a group, Timat muttered. Issei nodded. So this is it. Get ready whatever you have. Before we set out, I will go to our allies and inform them of what's to come. I have no doubt the factions are already mobilizing after witnessing our battle. Great Red stepped in suddenly. As I am now a part of the group, I will inform you of what's to come. Issei has said that the factions are mobilizing. Yes, that is true. However, it is more to it than that. They have gained some very powerful allies. The Norse is one of them, Orpheus the Infinite Dragon God, and Chaos Brigade is another, Great Red said suddenly. Issei chuckled at their shocked faces. Don't be afraid of what's to come. With you guys becoming dragons, your power is something on its own level. It was the essence made from Bahamut himself. Your power is enough to take them on, he said suddenly. Everyone calmed down after hearing and gave grins. This was going to be a long time coming. I assume you want them to yourself, Coqueville said with a grin. Issei chuckled darkly. Rias and her Purge are mine. This will be fun, he said loudly. Everyone nodded and chuckled. Great Red looked at Issei and chuckled. I wouldn't want to be one of them right now, he muttered. Everyone laughed at Issei chuckled too. The clock was ticking. The dawn of war was coming. Soon. Issei found himself sitting downstairs early in the morning. He was thinking quite a lot about the next few days and what they would entail. He knew the clock was counting down and he needed to move quickly before they got the upper hand and made their move. Oh, by the way, this is Chapter 20, Dawn of War, Part 1. My apologies. Since he knew without a doubt the majority of the war would take place in the underworld, he would see the dragon territory in his hands soon enough. He figured to give the group the day off to rest and gather what they needed. Then they would claim the territory and use it as a base. He knew that would be easy. However, the moment he did it, they would be the finals push and it would start. The war. It was very close every human day. Suddenly, he heard a couple of footsteps behind him and looked to see Donosik and Coqueville just waking up. They both quickly sat down on the couch next to him. So what's up, boss? Donosik asked suddenly. Issei rolled his eyes and chuckled. He would ask it like that. Donosik was laid back, one after all in his opinion. What are you thinking about? Coqueville asked. Issei sighed and began to speak. The war will no be doubt started the moment we enter the dragon's territory, and I have yet to gain all of my strength back from that fight, so I still need to rest some more. However, it's coming closer and closer, he said. Coqueville huffed as he heard that, which drew the attention of both males in the room with him. They wondered what he had in mind. Then they started stargazing, he said quickly. Or strategizing, he said quickly. Issei raised his eyebrow and spoke up. What do you mean? We already have the plan to go take over the dragon's territory, he asked confused. Coqueville just shook his head. Issei might be their leader, however, he was still a kid in some senses. Sure, he was about the age of an adult, however, he was forced to grow up quickly in one of those most harshest ways. Even Coqueville didn't wish something like that, much emotional and mental effects on a person. To be betrayed by people you held in such high regards was something very life-altering, so he expected the boy to have some gaps in his mental thinking. However, that didn't mean anything to him. He would learn them in time too, with people to help him. That is true, that we already have that figured out. But what else? Tell me, in any war, whether it's a small skirmish or some of the world's biggest wars, human and supernatural alike, who was already decided the victor? He asked suddenly. Both of them were taken for a loop at his statement. It was obvious to Issei that there was still quite a bit he needed to learn about. Donosik didn't expect this out of Coqueville, but he wondered where it was going. Seeing no answers or responses, Coqueville spoke up. Luck has nothing to do with it or it comes out on top. No one has the luxury of fate being on their side. Every single war has one thing in common. It has masterminds behind the efforts. They say history decides the victors. That is true in a sense, due to the fact they had what it took to win. Even the humans have realized this fact. War isn't a game. It's life or death, and we need to plan for it, he explained. Issei chuckled and looked seriously at Coqueville for a moment. Then, I'm appointing you as the head strategic and an intel specialist for this effort, he said simply. Coqueville chuckled, but nevertheless nodded. Very well. What do we do exactly about our enemies? He started. Issei wondered what he meant by that. Donosik had the same thought. Suddenly a new voice entered the conversation. In terms of strength, they are average. If you mean numbers, they have the advantage by a long shot. The Norse, angels, devils, fallen, and Orpheus and the Chaos Brigade is what we're up against. However, we have raw strength on our side. It was Great Red. Coqueville was silent as he heard it and let it digest. Damn, it's going to be a full battleground and carnage and chaos. We need a way to keep in contact with each other, or at least a way to let us know the other's positions. It's definitely going to be a big one. Some of them will be a challenge. Some enemies will be in the top 10 strongest list. Orpheus, Odin, Thor, not to mention the Chaos Brigade's versatile arsenal. Ko and his spear will be a tough match. It'll be a tough one, he finally said. Donosik scoffed and spoke up. That's an understatement, you know. We are all strong, sure, but you're forgetting the years of experience these beings have, not to mention the others, Satans, archangels, cadre classes, and leaders among the factions. All the enormous amounts of power, he said quickly. Issei sighed and leaned back. Donosik was right. It was time for everyone to train and push farther. Now the dragon's territory, Issei said suddenly. Everyone turned to him as he started again. The dragon's territory in the underworld is home to Tynein, who is also a member of Mesophilis' purge. So the moment we step foot in that territory, he senses us, it will be seen as him making us the first move. And he will no doubt inform his master. In turn, inform Sir Zex of our takeover, and they will no doubt will mobilize, he explained. Donosik scoffed after hearing that. That's an understatement. It will be a panic the moment we arrive. We step foot and it's already an act of war. No, they arrive shortly after, he said quickly. Issei laughed and spoke up. We have plenty of power. Satan class beings can be held off until one of us or more of us can join in. Watch for Sir Zex or any other beings. Do not underestimate their opponent, especially the Chaos Brigade. Orpheus will know where you are, most likely, he said. Everyone looked at him as he started to speak again. I will obviously need a few days to get back to strength. No. Doubt I nearly killed myself in that fight. Then we'll head to the underworld. I know the territory well. I actually trained there with Tynein before. No doubt he will try to defend it, he continued. Kokaville looked at him for a moment. What was Tynein like? Or Tynein like? He asked suddenly. Issei leaned back and spoke. Mountains, streams, harsh training spots. The Gremory estate was affected in the fight. I don't know how damaged it was, though, he said quickly. Kokaville shrugged and spoke. We might want to booby-trap the area around our base. There might be a bunker somewhere nearby the estate for supplies. No way they wouldn't have one for emergencies, he said quickly. Everyone looked at him for a moment. Makes sense. They rich as hell. No telling where it would be, he replied. Everyone looked at each other for a moment. In the meantime, focus on getting ready and honing your skills. You're going to need to be at your best when we leave, Issei said suddenly. Everyone nodded and started to do their own things. Issei, it was at least a week until he would be at full strength, but it was more long-term damage he was worried about. He waited for Bahamut, Dreg, give me the full rundown. How did the Juggernaut drive affect me? He suddenly asked the dragon's head. He waited for a response, and it was a few moments later Bahamut spoke up. You broke 3 ribs in a wrist and all that transformation at first. Secondly, your life force is severely shortened. A second transformation could be fatal if you used it as a last resort. You were lucky to come out of this one. You were lucky to come out of this alive as a result, he said. Issei sighed before speaking up. He had a question for them. How do I control my abilities, he asked. Both of them were silent after hearing that. Physical strength and endurance will help you be able to use your boosted gear longer. The other abilities are dependent on you and the amount of power you put in them, Drake said. Issei leaned back and as he heard them. Your other abilities are dependent on emotion. Argumentum's Call is activated upon rage along with the Reign of Annihilation. Controlling your emotions well enough may grant some better control over it, Bahamut said suddenly. Issei nodded and sat up. I guess I'll just work through it, he thought quickly. He wondered how the next week or so would play out. Scene break, now we're in the underworld. In Lilith, Sir Zex currently awaited Azazel, who was arriving soon. It wasn't long until the fallen angels walked through the door. Sir Zex had a serious face as they began. I heard about the fight and the damage it caused, Azazel said suddenly. Sir Zex nodded and began to speak up. It was big. 3/4 of the Gremory territory was destroyed from the blast. It's obvious hyoudou is becoming a real threat. After this, I have met with Seraphal and the elders so we can begin the final preparations, he said. Azazel nodded and spoke up. It seems Paimon had defected to his side. We only got a small bit before she did, Azazel said quickly. Sir Zex looked at him and then sighed. What do you know? He asked suddenly. Azazel sighed and sat down. Their base is currently at Volley's mansion. That's what they're saying. Volley's team with Issei's group in Great Red. It seems they're gathering more and more. I have a feeling something is coming. Soon, he said. Sir Zex looked at Azazel curiously as he spoke. What do you mean? He asked quickly. Azazel looked at him as he spoke. It's been a few days since his fight with Great Red, and it's quiet. No one has left his mansion yet. Either hyoudou is training more, which I doubt that. He just beat Great Red, so I highly doubt he needs to be stronger. I think they're also beginning their final preparations and will strike soon, he said. Sir Zex sighed and looked up. It seems I'll be taking a pit stop to Asgard to inform Odin that the time is soon. It seems that this is really it, huh? The countdown is only getting shorter, he said softly. Azazel nodded and spoke up. You're right. The Grigor are doing its final preparations too. This war is going to be a big one. No doubt the underworld is going to take a lot of damage because of it, he said. Sir Zex sighed and looked at him. There's nothing we can really do about it. That's the risks of these things, he said simply. Azazel nodded and stood up. I'll keep you informed about any new reports or things that come up, he said. Sir Zex nodded and watched Azazel disappear into a magic circle, leaving him alone. He knew that what was next. This meeting with Seraphal, before he knew it, he already on his way towards her office. He just wanted to get it done with already. The moment Seraphal saw Sir Zex, she knew it was time to get serious, and and by the look on his face, it was true for him as well. So let's get started, he said quickly. She nodded and began. The Council of Elders is waiting for us, she said. He nodded, and they both disappeared in a magic circle and reappeared in a large room filled with the heads of the clans. Everyone of importance was there. It was time to get down to business. So what are your guys' plans? An elder asked suddenly. Sir Zek stepped forward and addressed them. We have allies with the Norse, fallen angels, and angels. The whole war will most likely be fought in the underworld, so we have that advantage. It is time to start gathering resources and start building our numbers, he said aloud. Serafal nodded to his statement and began to speak. He is right. Hyoudou has become a bigger threat than ever. We think that he is close to being ready to strike. We need to be ready for it. Everyone needs to be prepared. Every other faction is preparing for war, and we must do the same, she said aloud. All the others looked around if deciding on something. Is it time? Is it time, as you said? Our clans will support the war effort, many of them said aloud. Sir Zex smiled. He knew they had just gotten that part done. Next line of business. We have some information about hyoudou, he said aloud. Serafal looked at it curiously. What kind of information, she asked, confused. Everyone else in the room wanted to know as well. We are know where their base is. However, with his group being there, it is defended well. Also, Azazel and Piaomin, one of his subordinates, spy on him for us. However, she has defected to his side. As of now, Issei Hyoudou is becoming very powerful as we speak. That's why we believe he will strike soon, he said aloud. Serafal was shocked, along with the rest of the elders in the room. It seemed Hyoudou was more resourceful than they thought originally. So it's really coming, Serafal muttered to herself. Sir Zek sighed as they heard of her soft voice. Yes, it is. However, we have no choice but to fight, he said. Everyone looked at him as he continued to speak. We also believe that with the fight he had with Great Red, he is still resting to get his strength back. It seems we have a few days at least until we can expect him, he said suddenly. Serafal shook her head and spoke. I never hoped it would come to this. Okay, I'll start notifying the citizens. This situation should call for martial law, though, Serafal said suddenly. Sir Zex nodded and spoke up. You're right. The panic will be bad enough. Now faced with the ultimatum will be the final push. I'm going to visit Odin and the Norse gods and tell them what's upcoming, he said quickly. Everyone was silent in the room. Martial law is a given in these types of situations. It is inevitable, a new voice said. Everyone turned around to see Azazel. What is it? What is this filth doing here? An elder screeched. Sir Zex put his hand on the signs in the room. Azazel? What is the meaning to disturbing this meeting? He asked quickly. Azazel spoke up. We have some new info about hyoudou. I think you'll want to hear it, he said quickly. Everyone turned to him as he spoke again. Hyoudou is on the move, he started. Everyone looked at him seriously. What is he doing? Serafal asked quickly. Azazel sighed and explained. He shortly left the mansion and proceeded to fly towards Kyoto, the territory of the yokai, he said quickly. A few gasps and shocks were the result of that statement. So he's allied with the Yakuza and the yokais? Anything else? Sir Zex asked quickly. Azazel shook his head and Sir Zex nodded and sighed. Thank you. It seems that the fact that it is starting soon is only concreted more by your information. Very well. Let it be known we are going to start the war very soon, Sir Zex said aloud. Sir Zex is right. You must prepare for the worst, she said. The council nodded as they watched the three of them disappeared into their own magic circles. It was time. The war was starting soon. Dawn of War, Part 2. Issa knew the time was coming, and it was coming soon. As he flew towards Kyoto to prepare Yakuza for what to come, he wondered how it would all play out. However, he had no doubt in his mind that he would be victorious. He would have the life he wanted, and not the one he was living under an illusion. Before he knew it, he was already sitting in Yakuza's office. So why have you come here so soon after the last time, she asked quickly. She wasn't expecting him at all. However, by his expression, she knew it was serious and he was here for a reason. Issei sighed and began to explain to her. The war will be most likely starting soon. Soon my group will be ready to move. We have decided to make a base in the underworld and the dragon's territory to be specific. We also have no doubt that the moment we enter the territory that Tynian will try to intercept us. If he is defeated, no doubt Philius will be notified about Sir Zex. Then it will start, he explained. Yakuza sighed after hearing him. Do you have an exact day when you will be leaving, she asked suddenly. Issei put his hands on his chin as he thought about her question. In truth, the battle with Great Red still left some soreness and tiredness and hadn't faded yet, so it might take a few days or weeks. However, he needed to give her an answer. I'd say 3 to 4 days. I'll send her a messenger before we leave, so that you can make appropriate preparations, he said. Yakuza nodded and hummed. She was about to speak up when a large magic circle appeared in the room. Yakuza seemed to be a bit surprised to see it. However, Issei knew the symbol. It was the Shinto gods. Soon, Susanoo, Amaterasu, and Tsukuyomi appeared. Yakuza suddenly spoke to them as they appeared. I thought you guys weren't coming till later, she asked. Amaterasu instantly noticed Issei and smiled. It seems you have a guest, Yakuza, and we decided to come a bit earlier this time, she said happily. Yakuza rolled her eyes at Amaterasu's usual bubbly personality. Issei looked over at the two other gods in the room. Tsukuyomi eyed him with a bit of warily. However, Issei could feel that he didn't think badly about him. When he looked at Susanoo, however, that was a different case. Susanoo looked at him like a snob, like he was someone important. So this is the brat that's taking it to the three factions, he asked suddenly. Issei narrowed his eyes as he heard the storm god. Amaterasu instantly spoke up. Don't speak like that, Susanoo. It wouldn't be wise to anger this boy, she said aloud. Susanoo looked at Amaterasu and spoke up. I just want to know if he can handle himself. Someone who is taking on the three factions should be able to, honestly. He doesn't seem like much, he said sincerely. Issei's eyebrows twitched. Yakuza suddenly stood up and slammed her fist on the desk. Susanoo, even if you're a god, you should respect others, she shouted. Susanoo glared at Yakuza. We're gods, not children. We don't need to be following orders from a brat, he said aloud. That was the last straw. Issei stood up and looked sharply at Susanoo, who quickly smirked. What brat? Got something to say? He mocked. Issei's look turned into a full-blown glare. You think that I should be You think that I shouldn't be leading? Isn't it the strongest that usually leads? Do you think that you could do any better? He asked. Susanoo chuckled and spoke up. You like to taste, brat? He asked. Yakuza quickly interrupted them. Calm down, the both of you. We don't need you two fighting right now, she said loudly. Issei chuckled and turned towards Yakuza, the leader. Actually, I think that's what needs to happen. Nothing too big, just to spar to show him who I am, he said. Yakuza didn't say anything. Susanoo quickly laughed. I think so too. This kid is rude. This kid is in it for a rude awakening, he said. Yakuza sighed and spoke up. Very well, let's go outside, she said. Before they knew it, they were outside. Susanoo and Issei were standing in a barrier, with the others outside watching. Outside, Amaterasu started to speak up. So how much we gonna go in Issei's strength, she asked. Yakuza shrugged. Well, he did take on Great Red, so it's clearly beyond anything we've seen before, she said. Tsukuyomi nodded and watched the two of them. To be honest, he was quite interested in this little sparring session that was going to begin soon. He knew Susanoo wouldn't know what hit him. He was always a snob and didn't know when to stop. Hopefully, this would teach him some humility. However, this fight turns out, there's no doubt in my mind, that Susanoo won't know what hit him. This kid is obviously packing some power. His aura is concealed pretty well, but if you sense for it hard enough, you'll see it's very powerful. His energy is chaotic and destructive, he said suddenly. Yakuza and Amaterasu nodded, and they turned to the fight as Susanoo spoke up suddenly. This is your last chance to back out, he said. Issei chuckled and spoke up. I shouldn't be saying that, he replied. I should be saying that, he replied. Susanoo narrowed his eyes and spoke loudly. I warned you, he shouted. Issei shook his head and got into a stance. Suddenly, a midnight blue glow appeared around Susanoo and a staff appeared in his hands. The others on the outside widened their eyes as they saw it. He knew it was using his weapon so soon in the fight. Issei looked at his staff and knew it was powerful. Suddenly, 4 spears of water appeared behind Susanoo and they shot off towards Issei like torpedoes. However, Issei wasn't scared, not one bit. Suddenly, everyone's eyes, including Susanoo's, widened. As Issei vanished in a burst of speed, behind him was an explosion. The water spears collided with the trees as Issei easily dodged them. He quickly delivered a kick to Susanoo's back and sent him flying forwards a good bit. As Susanoo got back up, he looked at Issei for a good bit. How'd he do that? That was a very powerful burst of energy, he quickly thought. On the outside of the barrier, everyone was surprised at the speed Issei utilized. It was obvious he was barely trying and just toying with the storm god. Tsukuyomi knew now that he didn't want to pick a fight with the boy. It was obvious to him that he was outclassed by a good bit. He's definitely got advantage with his speed, Yakuza said suddenly. Both Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi nodded. It will be hard for Susanoo to keep up with him. The question is, how is he able to create such speeds? It's obvious that it's not initiate. No, it's something he learned to do. If it's a matter of how much he can do it, all Susanoo needs to do is wait it out, he said suddenly. Amaterasu turned to the moon god. You're right about that. However, don't count the boy out. It's obvious he's just getting started, she said. Yakuza nodded to her statement. That's true, she mumbled. She was astonished as she saw how easily dodged Susanoo's water attacks in left and right, like it was nothing to him. Back inside the barrier, Issei knew he needed to watch how much power he used. If he went overboard, he'd only damage his body even more. You're damn right you would. Why would you even challenge the god? Drake roared inside his head. Issei rolled his eyes and heard the dragon. He was being a punk, and I felt like I needed to take him down a peg or two, he replied. Drake just grumbled and went silent. As much as I'd like to see Susanoo got smacked around, Drake is right, Issei. You can't go crazy or you'd do harm to yourself, Bahamut said suddenly. Issei rolled his eyes again as he heard Bahamut. However, even he couldn't deny that there was a huge, large amount of truth to them. It would be utterly stupid and completely foolish for them not to heed their words. However, Issei knew his limits and where he could take himself currently. He had doubt in his mind that he would need to put that much blood in his body during this fight. He turned to Susanoo suddenly as the Storm God spoke. I'll admit, you have quite the technique with the speed boost. However, I am no pushover, he said loudly. Issei suddenly smirked. Neither am I, he replied. He charged again, but his speed was back to normal. He couldn't just go wasting his energy, so he'd have to hold back some of his powerful combos and techniques. Everyone was surprised again as he quickly ducked over Susanoo's staff as it was swung at him. It was after that Susanoo was sent flying, yet again, with a tail. Outside the barrier, they were clearly not expecting that. He is a dragon, isn't he? Tsukiyomi asked quickly. Both Yakuza and Amaterasu nodded. It seems he isn't afraid to show it off a bit either, Yakuza said off with a blush. It was obvious the power was making both Yakuza and Amaterasu a little squeamish. They all watched as the tail disappeared. They suddenly turned to Susanoo, roared angrily. Damn you! He shouted. Issei chuckled and prepared for whatever was coming his way. Suddenly the ground shook. Issei quickly fell on one knee and it was a bit rough for him to withstand. He looked up to see the water rising and swirling like a tornado around Susanoo. It was coming from the cracks in the ground. Issei cursed and quickly rolled out of the way as the torrent of water shot past him. Susanoo was really taking this seriously. Outside the barrier, everyone was a bit shocked at how Susanoo was being. It was obvious to them he didn't really care. Tsukiyomi narrowed his eyes. The one weakness Susanoo had was his anger. It made him reckless and volatile. He wondered what Issei would do. Would he let the fight drag on, or would he put an end to it with someone stronger than Susanoo could counter? Back inside the barrier, Issei was contemplating on what to do. As he continued to dodge the torrents of water that was fired in his direction continuously, he knew Susanoo could keep it up for a good bit. He was a storm god after all. However, he knew Susanoo had his limits like everybody else does. So, he could wait it out and strike and finish it, but he didn't want to do that for a number of reasons. One, he didn't know Susanoo's limit and he didn't know how long he could keep it up. So if he could be dodging for a good bit and then he'd get tired and exhausted too. He didn't feel like dragging the fight on and any longer than it needed to be. So he decided to end it. Boost! Everyone looked at Issei, the boosted gear on his arm. Susanoo smirked. Issei was getting serious. However, what he didn't know was he wasn't getting serious. No, he was getting tired. He was ending it. Here we go. Tsukiyomi muttered as he saw the boosted gear. Both Amaterasu and Yakuza had their eyes glued to Issei as he prepared. They were all wondering what he was going to do. Susanoo shot a few more torrents, which Issei easily dodged. Before he knew it, a large explosion happened, and Issei was face to face with Susanoo, who was shell-shocked at how fast he became. It seemed this man was clearly a force to be reckoned with. The fight is over, Issei said loudly. Suddenly, everyone was shocked as they saw a black energy cover Issei's fist as Susanoo was punched in the gut, and the energy seemed to crackle and spark with destructive power as it exploded with extreme ferocity and sent Susanoo flying backwards straight into a tree. Everyone outside quickly covered their heads as the barrier was no match for the power Issei used. The howling winds of the shockwaves that escaped and roared far beyond it. They should have reinforced the barrier to hold against that kind of power. As Issei powered down, he looked over to see Tsukiyomi walking over to down Susanoo and hoisting him up on his shoulders. Yakuza and Amaterasu came over. They seemed nervous. Don't worry, I just wanted to teach that prick a lesson, he said suddenly. They were surprised at how fast his expression changed. Well, that certainly was something. You're right about Susanoo. He can be a little rude sometimes. His ego gets the best of him, Tsukiyomi said suddenly. Issei nodded, then started to speak again. As I was here earlier was my group is ready to move. In 3 to 4 days, the Underworld will be engaged in a war. Our base will be the Dragon's territory, he said suddenly. They all hummed and nodded. Very well. The Shito gods will fight with you as well, Amaterasu said quickly. Issei gave a bright smile. It seemed that Yakuza and Amaterasu even had more squeamish as they tried to hide a blush. It was obvious they were starting to have feelings for him. Well, I think it's time for me to return, Issei said suddenly. They nodded and watched Issei started to fly off. It seemed that the next few days were going to be interesting, no doubt. Scene break. This is 3 days later. It has been 3 days since Issei's fight with Susanoo. He and his group had found themselves outside currently. It was time. They are ready to head to the dragon's territory. So you guys know the drill, Issei asked suddenly. Everyone nodded their heads. We're not going to teleport straight into the dragon's territory. We will be where the battle took place. My bad. The Gremory estate, to be exact, he said suddenly. Some of them were a bit confused by that. Why not just straight take it over? Donosik asked suddenly. Some of them agreed with him. Issei sighed and spoke up again. We don't know if anyone will be around. They may be searching in the rubble for anything that is useful, so we're going to scout it out first and see what's going on, he explained. They all nodded after hearing him. Issei started to form a magic circle, and a gigantic blood-red circle engulfed the group, and they disappeared. As they appeared in the underworld, they were shocked to see what they saw. Damn, you weren't kidding when you said it would be a wasteland, Donosik muttered. Issei rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Well, it was quite the fight, he said. Great Red chuckled. That is an understatement, he added. Everyone agreed with him. So what now, Volley asked. Everyone turned to Issei. Let's look inside of what is now left of the Grummery estate, and if we can find anything that could be useful, he said. Everyone nodded and turned to a large burnt-up building. It was obvious to them it was time to get to work. Dawn of War, Part 3. The group stood up at the ruins of the Grummery estate, and it decided it would be best to scavenge for any supplies. Before they headed toward the dragon's territory, they decided it was best to split up. Taimat, Kokaville, Donosik, and Paimon found themselves grouped together. They were looking for information, anything that could help them with the faction's plan they were. So what exactly are we looking for? Donosik asked, bored. That they currently found themselves in Sir Zek's old study. Anything that details war plans, battle informations, coordination, anything along those lines, Kokaville said suddenly. Donosik sighed and began to look around the room for anything that popped out, anything that was out of place, suspicious, or anything that like that. He soon came to Sir Zek's desk and looked at it. It was a standard desk, one that you'll see in any office or study. He quickly started looking in the drawers, however, he didn't find anything worthwhile. However, as he closed a drawer, he noticed one with a lock. It was obviously locked, and he had no idea what was in it, so he decided to force it open. Kokaville, Taimat, and Pyomin were surprisingly when they felt Donosik's energy rise, and they looked at him to see him holding a light axe. And they watched in wonder as he swung it downwards with a ton of force. Then they heard a sharp, crackling sound as he broke the lock. What was that for? Kokaville asked seriously. Pyomin looked at Donosik like he was an idiot. Donosik looked dryly at the warmonger and former secretary of the Grigor. This drawer had a lock on it. Must be something important for Mauer to lock it up, he said. That made Kokaville raise an eyebrow. Pyomin just shook her head. All of them walked over towards as they decided to both take a look. Both Taimat and Kokaville, along with Pyomin, stepped forwards as Donosik pulled out a few yellow folders. They were basic. For storing documents, he set them on the table, and Kokaville opened them up, started to look at them. His eyes widened as he realized what he was looking at. What is it? Taimat asked suddenly. She noticed his expression and knew instantly something was up. Donosik turned to Kokaville as he heard them chuckle. Sir Zex was an idiot, all right, to hide these in a simple locked drawer. It's completely moronic, he started. Taimat rose an eyebrow. What exactly are they? She asked, impatient. Donosik wanted to know, too. He wanted to get on with it already. These are battle plans, and they're descriptive as hell. The amount in here details devils, angels, and fallen's positions. It also lists potential mashups, like they're setting up with someone else. Norse is in here as well. The info is completely suspicious, though. Why would Sir Zex leave it in a simple locked drawer? He suddenly said. That made sense as well. Maybe it's an outdated one. Maybe they scrapped it, Donosik suggested. Pyomin looked at Kokaville for a second. It's possible that that could be the case. Most of the time at the Grigor, we would just put old folders in a large file cabinet, just in case we needed them later, she said suddenly. Kokaville shrugged. It's not entirely possible. It's not entirely impossible. However, this is something we can use. Even if it was scrapped, they're most likely going to use the same ideas, just change them around a bit. This will help us predicting what they will do, he said suddenly. Taimat looked around in the study for a bit. Well, it seems that we got what we're looking for. Let's head back to the rendezvous point and wait for the others, she said suddenly. Both of them looked at for a moment and then nodded. Before they knew it, they were back on the spot and they were told to wait. That's what they had to do. They were the first ones back. Scene break. Now we're back with Issei's squad. With Issei, there was Kuroka, Rainier, and Bali. They were looking for an armory, any weapons they might find going to be useful. Issei didn't know what he could be in it, though. However, he knew about the Grummery's wealth. What exactly are we looking for? Bali asked suddenly. Issei shrugged. He had no real idea where to start. There's got to be something. Or there's got to be someone somewhere. I don't know though. I've never seen one when I was here. However, they would be stupid not to have one. He replied. None of them really ideas as well. Maybe we search in the bedrooms. The masters may have some secret armories, Volley said suddenly. Issei thought about it for a moment. It was a possibility. There was no doubt in his mind about that, so he shrugged and then nodded. We should start with Sir Zek's father and mother's room. They would most likely have one, he said suddenly. So they started towards the room and opened the door. They were surprised to see it was well conditioned. Issei looked around at the room for a moment, seeing if there was anything out of place or suspicious. Find anything? He heard Rainier say. Volley shook her head, while Issei shook his as well. And Kuroka just sighed. Maybe it's somewhere else, she said. Issei shrugged, then took another look around the room, and his eyes finally landed on the bed. He quickly looked under to find something off. He couldn't really tell what it was under it. So we only had one choice. You guys want to step back a bit, he said suddenly. They nodded and stepped back. They watched as the blood-red glow started to cover Issei's arm. Before anyone knew it, both of his arms had transformed into dragon side. Issei easily slid the bed across the room and finally got a better look at what was underneath. It was a switch of some sort. What do you think it activates? Volley said suddenly. Issei shrugged. Only one way to find out, he said suddenly. They all watched as he pulled the switch back. They all turned around when they started to hear gears turning. They were surprised when a false panel was revealed and a staircase was behind it. Where could this go? Issei said aloud. No one had to answer to that, so they did only one thing they knew. They walked down to see where it would lead. Before they knew it, they had walked down a large amount of stairs and came to a large door made of steel. Issei knew this was a personal armory, and not the big one where they were looking for. His thoughts were proven correct when he easily blasted the door off his hinges, and they finally got a good look inside. It was a personal armory, all right. A personal armory. There wasn't that much there, probably for the Lord Gremory and his wife. A few swords, spears, and shields, some armor as well. Well, this is certainly a start, but that's not what we're looking for, right, Issei? Kuroka said suddenly. Issei nodded. Then everyone watched as a large metal circle enveloped the armory, and the weapons and the armor disappeared. A pocket dimension? Volley asked confused. She didn't know he could do that. It seemed everyone else thought that was as well. Based on their expressions, they had the same thoughts as Volley. Yes. I had recently begun to learn how to use them. It took a few tries to get it right, but eventually it worked perfectly, he explained. Issei looked around for a bit. Okay then, time to search for some more. This was obviously just some sort of panic room that had to be a personal armory. We need to find the main one. However, I have no idea where to start, he suddenly said. Volley thought about it for a moment. In the mansion, the armory is under the foundation, like a basement. Maybe it's the same here, he suggested. Issei shrugged once again. He had no idea. However, he had no other options. Let's take a look around to see what we can find, he said. They nodded and they walked over the personal armory and back into the estate. They headed towards the stairs and descended underneath. They were shocked to find a pathway of corridors expanding all around them. Which way do we go? Kuroka asked, confused. Issei looked around for a moment. He got an idea. He walked up one of the corridors and put his hand on the wall. The rest of them watched with confusion and some anticipation. They were shocked when a burst of energy erupted from his hand and exploded outwards. They quickly put their hands up to the block of the wave of energy as it passed through them. They watched as he pulled his hand back and looked at the spot where it was. There was a small crater there. I marked this corridor as we'll go through it first. I will do the same to the rest as we go. That way, we will find something eventually, he said. With that said, the group walked on. Seabreak were with another group. And a group consisted of Irina, Kalawarna, Bikyo, and Arthur. They were assigned to food, and any provisions they found would be useful, so they found themselves in the most obvious of places, the kitchen. However, there was a problem. With the Battle of Great Red and Issei, the kitchen was an area that was affected the most, so there wasn't much left. However, they were determined to find something, so they started looking through cabinets to find only ingredients. No real food yet. Where should we search next? Irina asked suddenly. Byoko put his hands on his chin as he thought about it. He looked around and spotted something suspicious. The group watched curiously as Byoko walked over to look at the piece of wood. It was a piece of wood, but it was different. Byoko saw a handle and pulled on it. A cellar? He wondered aloud. The group shrugged and followed him down. They were surprised to see it full of food. A pantry, huh? Arthur muttered. Byoko shrugged. It works, he said. They couldn't argue with that. So what do? We can't transport all of this, Irina said suddenly. Conrad shrugged. Irina was right. Let's let Issei know we found this, then he'll decide what to do, Arthur said suddenly. To the group nodded and started to walk out. They headed towards the rendezvous point where Issei decided. By the time they got there, everyone else was already there. So what did you guys find? Issei asked suddenly. Irina looked at him and replied. A pantry full of unused food. It's in the cellar in the kitchen. We couldn't transport it all, so we decided to let you know what to do with it, she said. Issei nodded and turned to Kokaville. Anything useful, he asked. Kokaville grinned and handed him in the folder. Take a look, he said. Issei's eyes widened as he looked over at it. Okay then, I want you to make a plan according to this. We need to be ready, he said loudly. Kokaville nodded and took the folder back. So do you find anything good, Timeout asked. Issei chuckled and nodded. A fuck ton of weapons and armor. It was a bit tough to find it. It did take a bit longer than I expected. However, there's enough, he said. The group sighed and nodded. Issei looked around and it seemed he was waiting for someone else. Who are you looking for? Vali asked confused. Issei chuckled and pointed upwards. They all looked upwards to see Great Red in his dragon form. He landed about 10 feet in front of them. They watched as he started to glow a bright golden, transform into his human form and started to walk over. What did you find? Issei asked. Great Red was assigned to a scouting position to look over for any enemies that were here prematurely. Nothing really too bad. There were some scattered parties around the area, nothing too big though. About 3 to 5 devils a group. Tanin is around the dragon's territory right now. I could sense his energy. I hid mine so that I wouldn't be found out. However, it seems that the parties are out. The factions are moving. The war is coming, he said. Issei nodded and turned to his group. Well, you heard him. This is it. The time has come. Are you ready? Issei shouted. The response was expected. A roar of cheers and excitement flew throughout the area. Well then, let's go visit Tainin, shall we? He grinned. Chuckles erupted as the group entered a magic circle and teleported to the dragon's territory. As they appeared on the mountain, Issei stepped forwards and looked around. The area would be a good base once they made it. However, that would come later in time. It was time to confront Tanin. Everyone stepped back as Issei let out his power. The area around him started to crack and shake as he powered up. It was monumental. The amount he held, they knew Tanin would come soon. He was calling for him after all. A challenge of power. Everyone knew that the dragon couldn't resist a challenge. Power attracted power. Soon a large shadow descended among the area as Tanin arrived. So the brat has arrived. I knew this day would come, he spoke in a deep voice. Tanin looked over at the group inside. He knew what they were in for. So you have gathered a very powerful group all on your own. It seems the rumors were right, he said suddenly. Issei wasn't in the mood for chit-chat. It was time to get it on with. I'll be quick here, Tanin. You know the reason why I'm here, so I'll give you a choice. Either join me or side with the rest of the cannon fodder, Issei shouted loudly. The group's eyes widened as they heard him. It seemed he wasn't talking no bullshit. It was either join him or become prey. That was obvious enough. Now it was just whether Tainin would join. They all waited for his answer. Tainin sighed as he heard him. To ask such a thing. You have the power to destroy millions of lives at your hands, no billions. However, you are generous enough to give an enemy a chance. Such a thing is not common. Maybe it is time for a change. However, I have to decline. My pride as a dragon would be destroyed if I gave in that easily, he responded. Issei sighed and closed his eyes. Very well. You have made your decision, as have I, Issei replied loudly. Tainin narrowed his eyes and as Issei let out a lot more energy and looked at him in the eyes. The time has come, Tainin. Prepare yourself, he shouted. Tainin widened as Issei charged with blinding speeds. One single punch sent him flying backwards. It was time. It was starting. Nothing would be the same afterwards. So I'm going to end it off there for the final part. Thank you so much for 11,000 subscribers. And right now, as I'm writing this story, I did get my power back up and we hit 12,000 subscribers. I can't believe what's going on, and it truly is a blessing, and I cannot thank you enough. All my hard work is finally paying off, and I'm fucking livid about it, honestly. I love it. Okay, so thank you for all your support. It truly is a blessing. Without further ado, Spartanic out.